My child's art teacher asked, "Why is your daughter drawing symbols that were erased from all records in 1944? Miss Kravitz held up my daughter's sketchbook with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The afternoon sun through the art room windows made the graphite drawings look almost three-dimensional, symbols that seemed to move and shift as she tilted the page. "Mrs. Bergman, I need you to tell me where Sophie learned these." Her voice was barely above a whisper, though we were alone in the classroom. I looked at the drawings my 8-year-old had made during free art time, intricate geometric patterns interwoven with what looked like stylized letters or pictograms. They meant nothing to me. "I don't know what those are. Sophie's always drawing strange patterns. She says they come to her in dreams." Miss Kravitz set the sketchbook down and pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo of an old document, yellowed and fragile. "These symbols were used by a resistance network in Poland during the war, the Zimna Iskra, the Cold Spark. They were a group that documented Nazi atrocities, created an entire visual language to hide evidence in plain sight. Every symbol had meaning: locations of mass graves, names of SS officers, dates of massacres. The Nazis discovered the network in 1944 and executed everyone involved. Then they systematically destroyed every record, every document, every trace that the symbols ever existed." I felt my throat close up. "How do you know about them, then?" Miss Kravitz sat down heavily in one of the small student chairs. "My grandmother was a Holocaust researcher at the Yad Vashem archives. She spent 40 years trying to reconstruct what was lost. She found fragments, pieces of testimonies mentioning a visual code, but never the actual symbols. The Nazis were thorough. They burned libraries, executed witnesses, erased the Cold Spark from history. My grandmother died believing the symbol system was lost forever." She pointed at Sophie's sketchbook. "But your daughter just drew 18 different symbols with perfect accuracy. I recognized them because my grandmother had sketches from survivor descriptions, rough approximations based on memory. Sophie's versions are exact, detailed, complete. She's not approximating. She knows them." I picked up the sketchbook, my hands now shaking too. "That's impossible. Sophie's 8. We're not even Polish. My family is from Germany, but we immigrated in the 1950s. There's no connection to any resistance network." Miss Kravitz leaned forward. "Mrs. Bergman, what was your maiden name?" I felt defensive suddenly, protective of family privacy. "Why does that matter?" Her expression was urgent. "Because if your family was in Germany during the war, and your daughter somehow has knowledge of symbols that were deliberately erased, then someone in your lineage was connected to the Cold Spark, either as a member or as someone who had access to their documentation." My maiden name was Hahn. My grandfather, Friedrich Hahn, had been a low-level bureaucrat in the municipal government, processed paperwork and permits. He'd never spoken about the war, died when I was 12. My grandmother had died before I was born. My grandfather worked in city administration in Munich. He wasn't involved in resistance anything. He barely survived the war himself. Miss Kravitz pulled out another photo on her phone. The Cold Spark wasn't just resistance fighters. They had a network of sympathizers across occupied territories and even inside Germany. People who smuggled documents, hid evidence, passed along information. The visual code was designed to be memorized, transmitted orally or through demonstration. No written records that could be confiscated. If your grandfather had access, he could have learned it and passed it down without anyone knowing. I wanted to dismiss this as conspiracy thinking, but Sophie's drawings were right there. Perfect reproductions of symbols that supposedly didn't exist anymore. Sophie's never met my grandfather. He died 18 years before she was born. How would she know anything he knew? Miss Kravitz's expression shifted to something between excitement and fear. "That's what I need to understand. Has Sophie been exposed to any old documents, family heirlooms, anything that might contain these symbols?" I thought about the boxes in our attic, my grandfather's belongings that my mother had packed away after his death and never opened. There are boxes of his papers. My mother saved everything but never went through them, said it was too painful. They've been in our attic for 30 years. Miss Kravitz stood up abruptly. "Mrs. Bergman, you need to go through those boxes. If your grandfather was connected to the Cold Spark and kept documentation, you could be sitting on evidence of war crimes that were never prosecuted. Evidence that certain people would very much prefer stays buried." The way she said certain people made my skin crawl. "What certain people?" She lowered her voice even more. "The Cold Spark documented crimes committed by specific SS officers and German officials. Many of those men escaped prosecution after the war, assumed new identities, lived comfortable lives. Their children and grandchildren are now wealthy, powerful, some in politics and business. If evidence of their ancestors' crimes surfaced, it would destroy reputations, trigger criminal investigations, force restitution claims. There are people who would do anything to prevent that." I grabbed Sophie's sketchbook. "You're saying my daughter might be in danger because she drew some symbols?" Miss Kravitz picked up her phone. "I'm saying that if word gets out that your daughter has access to Cold Spark documentation, yes, she could be in danger. These aren't abstract historical concerns. There are organizations that actively suppress this kind of information. They monitor academic research, buy up documents at auction, threaten researchers. My grandmother received death threats when she published papers about the Cold Spark. Someone broke into her office and destroyed 20 years of research files. She was warned to stop investigating or face consequences. My hands were numb. I need to go home. I need to check those boxes. The drive home was a blur. Sophie was at her friend's house for a playdate, safe for now. My husband Daniel was at work, wouldn't be home until 6. That gave me 3 hours to tear apart our attic looking for evidence of something I didn't want to believe existed. The attic was hot and dusty, filled with decades of accumulated family debris. My grandfather's boxes were in the far corner, 6 cardboard boxes labeled in my mother's handwriting. I dragged them under the bare bulb and started opening them. The first 3 boxes were mundane. Old clothes, books in German I couldn't read, photographs of people I didn't recognize. The 4th box had official-looking documents, employment records, permits, the bureaucratic detritus of a man who'd worked in municipal administration. The 5th box had personal letters, all in German, written in cramped handwriting. I'd need to get them translated. The 6th box was different. It was smaller, wooden instead of cardboard, with a lock that had rusted through. Inside were notebooks, thin volumes with leather covers. I opened one and my breath caught. The pages were covered in symbols, the same symbols Sophie had drawn. I sat there in the sweltering attic staring at page after page of intricate geometric patterns and pictograms. My grandfather had known the Cold Spark Code. Not just known it, documented it extensively. Each page had symbols paired with German text, like a dictionary or cipher key. I pulled out my phone and called Miss Kravitz. She answered immediately. Did you find something? My voice was shaking. Notebooks. 6 notebooks filled with the symbols and what looks like translations or explanations in German. Miss Kravitz, what do I do with these? Silence on the other end then. Don't tell anyone else. Don't post about this. Don't scan the pages. Bring them to me tomorrow. I know people at the Holocaust Museum who can authenticate them and keep them secure. If those notebooks contain what I think they do, they're evidence in crimes against humanity. They need to be in the right hands. I heard a noise downstairs, my front door opening. Daniel wasn't supposed to be home yet. I have to go. I hung up and climbed down the attic stairs as quietly as possible. Daniel's voice called from the kitchen. Allison, you home? I came down trying to look normal, not like I'd just discovered my grandfather was connected to a secret resistance network. Yeah, just cleaning out the attic. You're home early. He looked stressed, his tie loosened and face pale. We need to talk. Something weird happened at work. Daniel was an accountant for a mid-size firm downtown. Weird at work usually meant software glitches or difficult clients, not anything genuinely concerning. What happened? He pulled out his phone and showed me an email. It was from someone named Klaus Reinhardt, claiming to be an attorney representing historical preservation interests in Germany. The email stated that they'd been informed Daniel's family might possess documents related to wartime activities, and they were prepared to offer significant compensation for the return of such materials. How do they know about the documents? I just found them an hour ago. Daniel's face went even paler. You found documents? What documents? I explained about Sophie's drawings, Miss Kravitz's revelation, and the notebooks in the attic. As I talked, Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to horror. Allison, this email came this morning, before you found anything, before you even knew there was anything to find. How did they know? The implications crashed over me. They've been monitoring us. They knew my grandfather had documentation. They've been waiting for us to find it. Daniel sat down heavily at the kitchen table. The email says they'll be in town this week and would like to arrange a meeting. They're offering $500,000 for any historical documents we might have in our possession. $500,000. That was more than we made in 5 years combined. More than enough to pay off our mortgage, fund Sophie's college, give us security. It was also a bribe to make evidence of war crimes disappear. We can't sell them. Those notebooks document atrocities. People need to know what happened. Daniel rubbed his face. I know, but Allison, think about this. These people found me at work. They knew about documents before we did. They're powerful enough to track us, wealthy enough to offer ridiculous sums of money. What happens if we say no? What happens if we try to go public? I thought about Miss Kravitz's grandmother receiving death threats, her research destroyed. We give the notebooks to the Holocaust Museum. We get them authenticated and protected. Once they're public knowledge, there's no reason to threaten us. Daniel pulled up something else on his phone. I Googled Klaus Reinhardt while I was driving home. There's no lawyer by that name in Germany. The email address is from a generic domain, probably spoofed. Whoever contacted me is using a fake identity. My phone buzzed. A text from Miss Kravitz. Don't go home. Someone broke into my classroom. They took Sophie's sketchbook and tore my office apart looking for something. Police are here. I didn't tell them about the notebooks. Be careful. I showed Daniel the text. He stood up immediately. We need to get Sophie, right now. We drove to Sophie's friend's house in tense silence. My daughter was playing in the backyard when we arrived, laughing and covered in grass stains, completely oblivious to the danger circling her. Sophie's friend's mother, Jennifer, looked surprised when we said we needed to take Sophie home early. Is everything okay? You both look upset. I forced a smile. Family emergency. Nothing serious, but we need Sophie home. We buckled Sophie into her car seat and she chattered about her playdate. about the drawings she'd made, about how the symbols in her dreams were getting clearer. Mommy, what do the symbols mean? I keep seeing them, but I don't know what they say. I turned around to face her. Sophie, where do you see them? In dreams? She nodded. And sometimes when I close my eyes during the day, it's like someone is showing them to me. A man with a kind face. He has an accent when he talks, but I can understand him. My blood ran cold. What does the man tell you? Sophie thought about it. He says the symbols are important. He says I need to remember them because they tell true stories. He says people tried to erase the stories, but we can't let them disappear. He seems sad when he talks about it. Daniel pulled the car over suddenly. Allison, is she describing your grandfather? I'd seen enough photos to know. Sophie, is the man old with white hair and glasses? She nodded enthusiastically. Yes, and he has really wrinkly hands. He's nice. He teaches me the symbols during quiet time at school and before bed. Is he someone you know? I couldn't breathe. My grandfather had been dead for 18 years. Sophie had never seen photographs of him. We'd never discussed him beyond brief mentions. There was no rational way she could be describing him in detail or learning cold spark symbols from him in dreams unless something impossible was happening. Daniel was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Allison, what's going on? How is this possible? I didn't have an answer. Genetic memory wasn't real. Ghosts weren't real. But my daughter was drawing symbols that shouldn't exist, symbols my dead grandfather had documented, and describing him with accuracy she couldn't have faked. I don't know, but we need to get somewhere safe and figure this out. Daniel started driving again, but not toward our house. We're going to a hotel, somewhere public with security. If people broke into Miss Kravitz's classroom and are tracking us, I'm not taking Sophie home. We checked into a hotel near the airport, paying cash, registering under Daniel's mother's maiden name. Sophie thought it was an adventure, jumping on the beds and asking if we could order room service. Once she was distracted by cartoons, Daniel and I huddled in the bathroom with the door closed. We need a plan. We have notebooks that powerful people want. Our daughter is somehow channeling information from your dead grandfather, and someone is actively threatening us. I pulled up Miss Kravitz's contact. I'm calling her. She knows people at the Holocaust Museum. We get the notebooks authenticated and transferred into protective custody today. Miss Kravitz answered on the first ring. Where are you? Are you safe? I explained about the hotel and the email Daniel received. Miss Kravitz, we need to hand over the notebooks now, before this escalates further. She agreed immediately. I'll arrange a meeting with Dr. Isaac Levinson from the museum. He's the director of their research division. He can provide security and get the notebooks analyzed. Can you meet at the museum in 2 hours? I looked at Daniel. He nodded. Yes, we'll be there. After hanging up, I went back to the hotel room where Sophie was watching cartoons. Sophie, I need you to tell me everything the man in your dreams has said. Every detail. She looked up at me seriously, more mature than 8 years old should be. He says his name is Friedrich. He says he did terrible things during the war because he was afraid. He worked for bad men and helped them hurt people. But then he met people from the Cold Spark and they showed him how to fight back in secret. He copied documents, memorized their code, saved evidence so the truth wouldn't disappear. He says he tried to tell people after the war, but nobody wanted to listen. They wanted to forget. So he wrote it all down and hid it, hoping someday someone would care. My grandfather's name was Friedrich. He'd worked in Munich municipal administration during the war. Sophie couldn't know that. We'd never discussed it. What else did he tell you, baby? She closed her eyes like she was remembering. He said men came to his house after the war. Men who wanted the notebooks. He hid them before they arrived. They threatened him and said if he ever told anyone what he knew, they'd hurt his family. So he stayed quiet his whole life. He's sad about that. He says it was cowardice. Tears were running down my face now. This was my grandfather, speaking through my daughter somehow, confessing sins and secrets he'd taken to his grave. He says you have the notebooks now and you have to be braver than he was. You have to tell the truth even if it's scary. The people he documented committed monstrous crimes and escaped justice. Their families became rich and powerful. Some of their children are in government now, making decisions about refugees and immigrants and human rights, all while their fathers and grandfathers mass-murdered innocents. He says the Cold Spark died so the truth would survive. Don't let them die for nothing. Daniel was crying too. Sophie opened her eyes and looked confused. Why are you both sad? Did I say something wrong? I pulled her into a hug. No, baby, you said everything right. You're helping us do something very important. 2 hours later, we were in a secure conference room at the Holocaust Museum with Dr. Isaac Levinson and 2 armed security guards. I'd brought all 6 notebooks, carrying them in a backpack like they were explosives. Dr. Levinson was in his 70s, a thin man with gentle eyes and hands that trembled slightly as he opened the first notebook. He spent 20 minutes examining the pages in silence while Miss Kravitz, Daniel, Sophie, and I waited. Finally, he looked up with an expression of awe. This is extraordinary. These symbols are Cold Spark code, absolutely authenticated. The German text provides context and translation. Your grandfather documented 43 separate incidents of mass executions, experiments, and systematic murder. He lists SS officers by name and rank, provides dates and locations, describes methods used. This is primary source documentation of war crimes. He turned pages carefully. Here, he documents the murder of 600 Jewish children at a school in a village outside Krakow. He names the commanding officer who ordered it, Lieutenant Wilhelm Brunner. Brunner survived the war, changed his name to Werner Beck, moved to Argentina, and then returned to Germany in the 1960s. He died wealthy and respected in 1998. Miss Kravitz leaned forward. Do any of the people your grandfather documented have living descendants? Dr. Levinson nodded grimly. Several. Lieutenant Brunner's son is now a member of the German parliament. Quite influential. There are others too. Children and grandchildren of documented war criminals who've built legitimate lives on blood money and stolen wealth. If this documentation goes public, there will be criminal investigations, civil suits, political scandals. The implications are enormous. He looked at me seriously. Mrs. Bergman, publishing this information will destroy powerful people. You'll face threats, legal challenges, possibly physical danger. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my grandfather living in fear for 40 years, taking his secrets to the grave. I thought about Sophie channeling his desperate message, begging us to be braver than he was. Yes, we're prepared. Dr. Levinson smiled sadly. Then we'll begin the authentication process immediately. We'll photograph every page, translate everything, verify the information against historical records. We'll also coordinate with international war crimes tribunals and human rights organizations. This evidence deserves the widest possible exposure. Over the next 3 days, Sophie stayed with my parents while Daniel and I worked with the museum's research team. The notebooks were even more damaging than initially thought. My grandfather had documented not just killings, but systematic looting, forced labor operations, medical experiments. He'd named names, provided locations, described methods with bureaucratic precision. He'd turned his administrative access into an evidence-gathering operation, copying documents, memorizing testimony, preserving the Cold Spark Code as the key to understanding it all. Dr. Levinson connected us with a legal team specializing in war crimes prosecution. They explained that while most of the perpetrators were dead, their estates could face restitution claims. More importantly, several living descendants held positions where their family history mattered. A German parliamentarian descended from a mass murderer, a Belgian banker whose grandfather had run forced labor camps, a French industrialist whose father had collaborated with the SS. Once we publish, the media will explode, the lead attorney explained. You'll be at the center of an international scandal. People will call you heroes and they'll call you troublemakers. Some will offer support and others will try to discredit you. You need to be prepared for your lives to change permanently. I was ready, but then Daniel got another email, this time from someone who didn't bother with fake names. The message was short. Give us the notebooks and we'll give you $2 million and your daughter's safety. Refuse and we'll destroy you in ways you can't imagine. You have 48 hours. It was unsigned but included a photo of Sophie playing at my parents' house, taken from outside through a window. They were watching her. They knew where she was. Daniel's hands shook, showing me the email. They're threatening Sophie directly. Allison, we have to consider this. Maybe giving them the notebooks in exchange for our daughter's safety is worth it. I felt rage like I'd never experienced. If we give in to threats, every monster with a family secret will know they can get away with it. Every descendant of war criminals will know evidence can be buried with enough money and intimidation. My grandfather spent 40 years in silent terror. I won't do the same. I forwarded the email to Dr. Levinson and the legal team. We're being directly threatened. We need protection. Within an hour, the museum arranged for private security, and the legal team contacted the FBI. An agent named Rebecca Walsh came to interview us that evening. Agent Walsh was professional and direct. Threats involving historical evidence fall under federal jurisdiction because they often cross international borders and involve foreign actors. This email came from a server in Switzerland, but was routed through multiple countries. Professional work. We're tracing it, but don't expect quick results. She looked at the photo of Sophie. Your daughter is the leverage point. They know threatening you directly might backfire, might make you more determined, but threatening your child changes the calculus. Standard intimidation tactics. Daniel spoke up. Can you protect her? Can you protect all of us? Agent Walsh nodded. We can provide security details and safe housing while we investigate. But Mrs. Bergman, Agent Walsh, you need to understand something. The people making these threats have resources and patience. Even with FBI protection, you'll be looking over your shoulder for years. Is exposing 80-year-old crimes worth that? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Those crimes led to fortunes that still exist, power that still influences policy. The descendants of murderers are making decisions about asylum seekers and refugees while their grandfathers committed genocide. That's obscene. It has to be exposed. Agent Walsh smiled slightly. Good. Because backing down now would just teach them intimidation works. The museum scheduled a press conference for the following week. Dr. Levinson would present the findings, the legal team would outline planned prosecutions and restitution claims, and I would speak about my grandfather's courage and cowardice, his desperate attempt at redemption through documentation. The night before the press conference, Sophie had another dream about Friedrich. She came into our hotel room at 3 in the morning and climbed into bed between Daniel and me. Mommy, he says thank you. He says he can rest now because the truth is going to come out. He says he's sorry he was scared. He says you're strong in a way he wasn't. I held her close. Did he say anything else? She nodded against my chest. He says the men who are threatening us are connected to Lieutenant Brunner, the one who killed the children. Brunner's son is organizing the threats because he knows if the truth comes out, he'll lose his political position and his family will lose their money. He says be careful because these men are desperate. Agent Walsh had been sleeping in the hotel suite's adjoining room. She came in when she heard us talking. Sophie, can you tell me exactly what the man said about Brunner's son? Sophie repeated the information, adding details I hadn't heard. He said Brunner's son. His name is Klaus Reinhardt now. He changed it to hide the connection to his father. He has people working for him who intimidate anyone who gets too close to the truth. He's the one who sent the email. Agent Walsh's expression sharpened. Klaus Reinhardt. That's the name on the email your husband received. The fake attorney. She pulled out her phone and made calls despite the early hour. Within minutes, she confirmed Klaus Reinhardt was indeed the son of Wilhelm Brunner Werner Beck. He was a German parliamentarian, member of the Conservative Party, known for anti-immigration stance. His political career would be destroyed if his father was exposed as a mass murderer. This is enough for us to investigate him directly, Agent Walsh said. If we can prove he's behind the threats, we can bring charges. Obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, conspiracy. This gives us leverage. The press conference was held in the museum's main auditorium. Media from 12 countries attended. Dr. Levinson presented the notebook's contents with clinical precision, displaying translated pages on large screens. The names, the dates, the locations, the crimes. It was overwhelming, horrific, undeniable. When it was my turn to speak, I talked about my grandfather. Friedrich Hahn was not a hero. He was a coward who participated in atrocities through his bureaucratic role, but he chose to document what he witnessed. He preserved the Cold Spark Code as a key to understanding evidence that others wanted destroyed. He lived in fear for 40 years, too scared to speak out. I'm speaking now because I refuse to inherit his fear. The men he documented committed monstrous crimes and escaped justice. Their families became wealthy and influential. Some of their descendants now hold positions of power. They don't deserve that power. They don't deserve the comfort built on blood money. The victims deserve to be remembered. The survivors deserve acknowledgement. The truth deserves to be told regardless of who it inconveniences. The room erupted in questions. Reporters shouted about specific names, about Klaus Reinhardt's connection, about the threats we'd received. Dr. Levinson handled most of the inquiries, explaining the legal processes that would follow. Then someone asked about Sophie. Is it true your daughter was drawing these symbols before you found the notebooks? How did she know them? I hadn't planned to discuss this part, but the question was out there. Yes, my daughter has been drawing cold spark symbols for months. We don't fully understand how she learned them. Perhaps genetic memory, perhaps something beyond scientific explanation. But she's been channeling my grandfather's message, his desperate attempt to have his documentation found and shared. Whatever the mechanism, she's been essential to bringing this truth forward. After the press conference, the story exploded globally. News organizations investigated Klaus Reinhardt and found disturbing connections. His family's wealth traced directly to property seized from Jewish families. His father's military service records had been sealed but were now being reopened. Other descendants of named criminals were being investigated, their business dealings scrutinized, their political positions questioned. Klaus Reinhardt held a press conference denying everything, claiming the notebooks were forgeries, that my family was seeking attention and money. But forensic analysis confirmed the notebook's authenticity. The paper was from the 1940s. The ink was period appropriate. The handwriting matched my grandfather's documents. More importantly, the information in the notebooks aligned with survivor testimonies and other historical records. It was real, verified, irrefutable. 3 days after our press conference, Klaus Reinhardt was arrested in Germany on charges of witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. Agent Walsh had built a case connecting him to the threatening emails, to surveillance of my family, to payments made to individuals who'd broken into Miss Kravitz's classroom. His arrest triggered a political scandal in Germany. His party stripped him of his positions, and criminal investigations expanded to include fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The other descendants named in the notebooks faced varying consequences. Some issued public apologies and pledged restitution. Others went into hiding. Some tried to fight the revelations legally but found courts unsympathetic. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. Over the following months, Sophie's dreams about Friedrich gradually faded. She told me one morning that he'd come to say goodbye, that he was at peace now, that the truth had set him free in some way she didn't fully understand. He said, "You're brave, Mommy." He said he wishes he'd been brave like you. I cried holding her, this 8-year-old who'd carried her great-grandfather's burden without understanding its weight. The cold spark symbols stopped appearing in her drawings. She went back to drawing horses and rainbows and all the normal things children draw. Miss Kravitz stayed in touch, helping coordinate with Holocaust education organizations that wanted to include the Cold Spark story in their curricula. The symbols that had been deliberately erased were now being taught, preserved, turned into a tool for remembering rather than forgetting. A year after the press conference, my family attended a ceremony at the museum where my grandfather's notebooks were formally archived. Survivors and descendants of victims spoke about what the evidence meant, how it validated their family stories, how it brought a measure of justice after decades of denial. Sophie stood beside me, holding my hand, understanding now why the drawings had mattered, why the scary time when we lived in hotels and had security guards had been necessary. "Mommy, did we do the right thing?" she asked. I knelt down to her level. "Yes, baby. We told the truth even though it was hard and scary. That's always the right thing." She smiled, and for a moment I saw my grandfather's face in hers, the same eyes, the same quiet determination. The notebooks remained in the museum's archives, accessible to researchers, teachers, and anyone seeking to understand what had been deliberately erased. The Cold Sparks mission of preserving truth in the face of systematic destruction was finally complete, 80 years delayed but no less important. Klaus Reinhardt and 3 accomplices received prison sentences for their attempts to suppress the evidence. Other descendants of documented criminals faced civil suits and reputation destruction. Some of the stolen wealth was returned to surviving family members of victims. It wasn't complete justice, but it was something. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.